My real dad was a heroin addict, and my grandpa was an alcoholic for about 30 years. I'm from Astoria, across the river. I grew up over there, and there was nothing to do around there after, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night. So, I mean, you could either use or, do homework, and well, everybody was partying. My dad was in and out of prison. I didn't know him though. He was out of my life at 3. I mean, I definitely was numbing myself from, how I felt about myself and how I thought others felt about me. I never was really close with, my mom. She worked all the time, and, I had a stepdad, but I didn't know my real dad. And for a long time, I wondered, why I wasn't good enough for him to quit using for. I knew about it, and I knew better than to do it, which is why it was crazy that I was the one that became the addict. I didn't try to slow it or ask for help. I thought I was fine, and I was managing. I got in a car accident when I was 17 and was prescribed Percocet, and it wasn't really a big deal, I thought. I got it from a doctor, it was fine. I started buying it on the street, which I knew wasn't okay, but it was still from a doctor, so I thought, it was better than heroin or meth or anything like that. And so I started using them before I even knew what withdrawals were. I already had them, and it was too late. A boyfriend I had, he would only come around when I had drugs, so I kept buying them to keep him there. I had very low self-esteem and found my worth in him. I thought it was okay, but once I started relying on it and I was sick when I didn't have it, I knew I had a problem. I was living on the street, I was sleeping on the sidewalks. I just thought it was really cool I didn't have to pay rent and I would have more money for drugs. I was living up in Washington, and they stopped making prescription pills the way that everyone wanted them to be made, so we switched over to heroin. It was a really hard transition for me because all of a sudden I was stepping into the bad drugs, and then I knew I had a problem at that point, and it made me feel dirty because I was using drugs and needles and didn't care anymore. I didn't really start feeling really bad about myself until I became homeless. I was on my way up to Portland to pick up heroin, and I got robbed at gunpoint in Portland after my car broke down and stranded up there. And that is where I started to be homeless for the next 3 years. It was the summer when I became homeless. It was July, so it was hot. It wasn't a big deal. It was camping every day. It was fun. Then when winter came, obviously that was a little worse. There was snow, there was rain all the time. I lived in a homeless camp off and on for about 2 years until I started dating a dealer. And it wasn't really long after that I was hanging out with somebody else who gave me a free hotel to sleep in. And he brought his friend over one day, and he left. He went to the store, and his friend raped me. And when he got back, I told him, he acted surprised, he didn't know. And then it happened again the next day and the next day. He was selling me for money so that he could get more drugs for himself. He was on meth, so he would stay up for days, weeks at a time. And when he finally came down and went to sleep, I left. I feel that's really when I switched from being so innocent and naive to having to act strong, even though I didn't feel it, but I knew I couldn't keep letting this happen to myself. I could give up the heroin and the meth, like that's fine, because obviously those, weren't okay. But in my head, I couldn't wrap like around the fact that alcohol was a drug too. Well, my grandma died, and my parents wouldn't let me come see her before she died or at her funeral because I was using. And like, even if I wanted to get clean at that time, I was just so hurt that I couldn't. I kept using for another probably 10 months, and even harder. I started using over an ounce of heroin a day, and I really didn't care anymore. And then when my grandpa got sick about 10 months later, I couldn't miss out on his life too. So I checked into Klean, and I'm not gonna say it wasn't hard, but this time like I had a reason, and I got to be with him in his last few months. I don't remember a whole lot of the last 24 hours. I just remember packing for about 6 hours, making the driver wait. I got in the van, and then I was here. The first month I was here, I was pretty mean to everybody. I didn't realize it, but I was, and it was pointed out to me. I started helping out other girls, and I started, being the role model that I hadn't been in so many years, and it just made me feel so much better about myself. And I couldn't give up at that point. I felt like I had to be a role model, and I had to do it so that others could see it could be done. I hadn't worn makeup in 3 or 4 years. I didn't straighten my hair or anything. My hair was just knots all over when I was homeless. And I remember cutting it all out and still having way too much hair still. But, like being able to feel pretty again and feel worth something more than my body was amazing. And, just being able to get up and get dressed and feel better about yourself every day is I don't know. I don't even know how to answer that. After 83 days in inpatient, I transferred over to the IOP, and I knew I had to have structure. So I moved into sober living, and I stayed there for about 3 months. I know everyone says wherever they went to treatment is what saved them, but I believe in Klean so much because it did save me. The people that worked here were so loving and compassionate, and they just cared about how I was doing. And I couldn't wait to get up in the morning to see them again. And they became family, and the girls I was here with became family. I don't really like the rain. I was homeless and living in it, sleeping in it, for about 3 years. And so, anything I can do to stay out of the rain. When I got out of treatment, I started working at Subway, and then I moved up to a pizza parlor, and then I went to being a waitress. I was providing for myself for the first time ever at 27 years old. I had never been on my own, never had my own place. It was really easy for me to, I think, be humble about those things because I lived on the sidewalk. So if I could live on a sidewalk, I could live anywhere. Everything just started to fall into place at that point. I had a job, I had an apartment, I had a car, and then Klean called me and offered for me to come in and have an interview, and I just, I had to take it. I was actually contemplating moving away at that point, but this was my dream, and I couldn't not come in for it. So I came in for the interview, and I started working here. I go around to the high schools in our area, and I tell them my story, and I tell them everything because I think they need to hear it. I know there's parts of it that some parents don't really agree with me saying. You could be homeless, you could be raped, you could be kidnapped, you could die, and they don't realize that. My parents wanted nothing to do with me when I was using, which I understand now. Once I got sober, you know, for the first probably a year, they were so scared that I was gonna relapse and I was gonna leave again. And so they kept themselves not at a distance, but I think emotionally at a distance. And now, you know, I have almost 4 years clean and I don't need their help as much necessarily, but if there is a time I do and I ask them for money or something, they hand it to me without hesitation. Like, they trust me again, and that's an incredible feeling. And this is my house. I never thought I would live in a place like this. Like, I mean, I have almost 5 bedrooms and 22 acres, a barking dog, 2 cats. I definitely feel like I made it in life. Like, it's really hard for me to remember the person I used to be. And when other people, you know, they don't believe me because they see my life now. I've never had my own place before, so to have someone trust me with their house like this is amazing.